Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shiur.
Shalom and welcome back to today's Daf Yomi Shabbos Daf Chaf Beis. We're on the last line of Chaf Aleph Amud Beis. Says the Gemara, Omar Rav Kahana, Dorash Rav Nosson bar Menyumi, Mishmeid Rabbi Tanchum. So Rav Nosson bar Menyumi taught us in the name of Rabbi Tanchum the following halacha. Ner shel Chanukah, if he places the light of Chanukah, the menorah of Chanukah, very high up, shenicha l'mala mechaf amma, he placed it higher than 20 amas, which is beyond the range, which is beyond the peripheral vision of the passerby. In this case, it doesn't really perform, it's not displaying the nes, it's not noticeable. So the Bnei Rishus Rabbim, therefore, says the Gemara, psula, it is puzzle. And we find a similar halacha by sukkah and mavoi. So this concept is kisukkah ukemavoi. We find a similar halacha, a sukkah, which is taller than 20 amma, or a mavoi, which is the cross beam placed above the entranceway to the alleyway which leads to Rishus Rabbim. This is a concept discussed in the Gemara in Eruvin. The Chacham obligated one to place this kaira, this cross beam, to call attention that the fact that the alleyway, the mavoi, is a separate entity. It's not Rishus Rabbim. So if it's too high up, if it's beyond 20 amma, it's puzzle. And according to some opinions, the reason for the psul of sukkah and mavoi is also related to this concept. When it's too high up, we don't notice it. When one sits in the sukkah, one will not notice the schach if it's higher than 20 amma. One will not notice the kaira, and therefore will not call attention to the separateness of the mavoi. It won't provide a heker. And therefore all these three items have this similarity. They're Chanukah, sukkah, and mavoi, that they can't be placed higher than 20 amma. Continues the Gemara of Rav Kahana, Dorash of Nosson bar Menyumi Mishmei Rav Tanchum, another drasha from the same Manda Amar Mishmei Rav Tanchum. Maidichsiv v'haboy reik ein boy mayim. This is regarding the pit which the Shvatim tossed Yosef into. So the Torah tells us that the boyer, the pit, was empty. Reik ein boy mayim. It didn't contain any water. Says the Gemara, doesn't it seem to be redundant? If it says the boyer is empty, don't I already know that there's no water present? So why does the Torah need to repeat itself? What does the Torah mean by saying there was no mayim there? We imply from here there's a diuk, that something else was present in this boyer. Indeed, there was no water. However, there were snakes and scorpions in this boyer. Nevertheless, Yosef experienced a miracle and he wasn't affected, wasn't harmed by those nechashim and akravim in this boyer. Now, certainly they didn't know that there were nechashim and akravim there, or else, as the Rabban explains, when they saw that Yosef came out alive and unaffected by the nechashim akravim, their regard to him, their negative regard to him should have changed dramatically. What a tzaddik experienced such a nace. So apparently they didn't know about the presence of nechashim akravim. In addition, I say the Mefarshim, certainly Reuven, who was trying to save Yosef and by advising them to put him in the bar, he certainly didn't know about the presence of the nechashim and akravim in the bar. Continues the Gemara back to Ner Chanukah, Amar Rabba. Ner Chanukah, where is one meant to place it? We know that one is meant to put it outside near the doorway, whether it's out in the courtyard or out in Rishus Rabbim. But how close to the doorway must it be placed? It says the Gemara, Ner Chanukah mitzvah la'anicha betefach hasmucha lepesach, within a tefach of the doorway. Says Rashi, why? Because otherwise, if it's not close enough to the doorway, it is not nikar. It is not indicative of the fact that the balabayis put it there. So it's not a proper display of Persumei Nisa. Apparently the personal element is part and parcel of the displaying of the Ner Chanukah. We need to know who is placing the Ner Chanukah, who is the owner, and who is expressing the Persumei Nisa with this menorah. Okay, so within a tefach to the doorway. Which side of the doorway? The right or the left? Where? Says the Gemara of Achaber, the Rava Amar Miyamin, on the right side of the doorway, on the way into the door, on the way in. Rav Shmuel Medifti Amar Mismail, on the left side, going into the doorway. Says the Gemara, what is the final halacha? Mismail on the left side. Why? Kedei shetehei ner Chanukah mismoil, so that on the left side of the doorway going in, there will be the Chanukah ner. Umezuzah mimin, and the mezuzah will be on the right. Why is the mezuzah on the right side of the door? Says Rashi, we know that the mezuzah is bimin because it says uchsaftam al mezuzah is beisecha uvisharecha. The Gemara makes a drasha, beisecha biascha, derech biascha, on your way in, and the right side of the person, the right foot, takes precedence when he walks. It leads the way. When he lifts his feet, the right one is the one that is lifted first. So the right side is considered to be derech bi'ascha, on your way in, and therefore the mezuzah is on the right side on the way in to the home. So there's a mezuzah on the right, and the menorah is on the left. Why is it so important to have the mezuzah on the right and the menorah on the left? Says the Ritva. This way the person will be totally surrounded by mitzvahs. The mezuzah on the right, the Chanukah menorah on the left, and the tzitzis that he's wearing right in the middle. Continues the Gemara. Omar vid Omar vasi. Asala hartzos mois keneged ner Chanukah. We learned yesterday that there's a concept of asal l'shtamish l'oira, when we not divert the illumination of the ner Chanukah for uses other than the actual mitzvahs ner Chanukah. The Gemara here will add another dimension. Not only may you not use the illumination of the ner Chanukah for other uses, for significant uses, for shimush kavua, but even for casual uses, a shimush arai, one is also not permitted to use the ner Chanukah for that. Also lahartzis mois, one may not even count money. Keneged ner Chanukah, opposite the light of the ner Chanukah. Continues the Gemara. So Rabbi Yehuda says this in the name of Ravasi. Says Rabbi Yehuda, Ki Amrisa Kamei Shmuel. When I related this halacha, this Rabbi Asi's halacha, in front of Shmuel, he challenged it. Amar, he said, Amar li v'chiner kedusha yeshpa. Does the ner Chanukah have sanctity? Does it have kedusha? Why is it usher to count money in front of the ner Chanukah? It's merely a shimush arai, a casual use, and the ner Chanukah is not so prominent and significant. It's not a davar kedusha, so that you should go ahead and prohibit even this type of casual use. V'chiner kedusha yeshba. It can't be that this is asur. Continues Gemara, Maskevil Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef challenged this statement by Shmuel, this assertion that the isur of hartzos mois is somehow related to kedusha. That only something which has kedusha, that is grounds to prohibiting this type of use. It says Rav Yosef, "B'chidam kedusha yeshboi." Does the blood of a chaya or oif, which require kisei hadam, there's a mitzvah that if one shechs a chaya and oif, he's meant to cover the blood with afar. So this dam, which a mitzvah is performed with, which is dam, are you going to say this dam has kedusha? Certainly not. It's only blood. It's a dvar chulin. Nevertheless, we learn in the Brisa that one is meant to relate to it with respect, with kavod, and not to be mavazit. So evidently, kedusha is not the benchmark to determine whether or not it can be treated and related to in a disrespectful manner. Says Rav Yosef, "V'chidam kedusha yeshboi." This as we learned in the Brisa, v'shafach v'kisa. V'shafach means he shechs the animal, v'kisa, and he covers the dam. So the Brisa makes a drasha. V'shafach v'chisa b'ma sheshafach yichase. With the same aver, the same part of his body that he actually does the shechita, which is his hand, he should use his hand for kisi as well. Shelo yichasena b'regel. He shouldn't do kisi adam, the mitzvah of kisi adam, with his foot. Why? Shelo yeyu mitzvah is b'zuyis alav. So that he wouldn't relate with a lack of respect to mitzvahs. So we see here that although we're speaking about ordinary dam, which certainly has no kedusha, still in all we're meant to relate to it with respect, we're meant to do the mitzvah of kisi adam with kavod, not with your foot, which is a busy mitzvah. The ma'aseh mitzvah is meant to be done with kavod. Hachanami, says Rav Yosef regarding the ner Chanukah, since it's a chevet shel mitzvah, shelo mitzvahs b'zuyis alav. Over here too, one is meant to show that the mitzvah is not buzzing on him. He doesn't relate to it with a lack of respect. And therefore, one is not meant to divert the illumination of Ner Chanukah for ordinary use, even to count money, opposite the Ner Chanukah. So once again, Rav Yosef compares Ner Chanukah to Kisi Adam, just like by Kisi Adam, the Dam certainly doesn't have Kedusha, doesn't even have the status of a Ner Chanukah. Nevertheless, the Maisa Mitzvah is meant to be done with kavod. The covering of the Dam is meant to be done in a manner of respect, with your hand, not with your foot. Shelo yu mitzvahs bezuyos olav, here too, in Ner Chanukah, even though it's not a davar kadosh, nevertheless, it's a Maisa Mitzvah, and the Chayvet Shom Mitzvah is meant to be related to with respect. Continues the Gemara. What about Noyes Sukkah? What about the decorations of the Sukkah? May one derive benefit from the Sukkah decorations during Yom Tov? Amar Leisa, Shmuel Levi responded, certainly not. Harei Amru, didn't they say, Asur lehartzis mois k'neged Ner Chanukah? One is not meant to even count money in front of the Ner Chanukah. We're not meant to divert its use for anything other than what it was primarily designated for. So here too, regarding Noyes Sukkah, the decorations of Sukkah, certainly one may not use it for personal use. So you brought a raya from Chanukah to Sukkah. Rav Yosef, Morid Avram, the master of Avram, meaning Hashem, it's a lashon of Shvuah. He exclaimed with surprise. Rabbi Shimon Levi is basing the Isser of having enough in the Noyes Sukkah, b'mistabek from Noyes Sukkah, basing that on Chanukah. Tali Tanya, b'dloi Tanya? How could he base a halacha which is explicitly expressed in a brisa? The halacha that one may not consume the Noyes Sukkah on Sukkahs is expressed in a brisa. It's a beferish brisa. How does he depend that and base that on the halacha regarding Chanukah, which is not a brisa, which is merely a memra of Amiroim? So why does he base Sukkah on Chanukah? It should be just the opposite. He should base Chanukah on Sukkahs, which is a brisa. Once again, it says the Gemara, Amar Yosef, Morid Avram, Toli Tanya b'loi Tanya. He's basing a halacha which is stated in a brisa, b'deloi Tanya, on a halacha which is not contained in a brisa, merely a halacha from a mamora. What does he mean? Sukkah Tanya. The halacha regarding the decoration of Sukkah is an express brisa. Chanukah lo Tanya. The halacha of Chanukah, the Ner Chanukah, is not a brisa. Where is the brisa of Sukkah? Says the Gemara, the San is learned. If one puts chach on the Sukkah properly, v'itra b'kramim, and he decorated with embroidered sheets, v'sadinam tzuyarn, with colored sheets, v'tolaba, and he hung up in the Sukkah various decorations, egoizim, nuts, afarsikin, peaches, shkedim, almonds, v'rimoin, and pomegranates, u'brachli anovim, clusters of grapes, v'itr shel shibolim, v'atar shel shibolim, the wreaths of the grain. Or he hung up little containers of yenos, shmonim, aslasais, wines, oils, flour. So these are considered to be the decorations of the Sukkah that are designated for providing beautification for the Sukkah. Also, le'stavik mehen, one may not consume these items, one may not use these items ad motzei Yom Tov v'achron shel Chag, until after the final day of Yom Tov. So since they're designated for Sukkah, for the mitzvah of Sukkah, one may not partake in these items. However, if he stated explicitly a condition that he doesn't want to separate from it, so he makes his condition before Sukkahs, in that case, it doesn't get designated as Noyes Sukkah, and he may indeed use it. So he follows his conditioning. So we see here that this halacha of the Isser, the prohibition in consuming the Noyes Sukkah on Sukkahs, is a brisa. So how could it be that Rav Shimon Levi based the halacha of Sukkah on Chanukah, which is not even a brisa? He should have done the opposite. He should have based the Isser of Chanukah on Sukkahs, which is a brisa. Elam Rav Yosef, rather, says Rav Yosef, indeed, Avuin the Kuladam, the father of all these halachas, the father of this concept, the source, base for this entire concept of not diverting something which was designated for mitzvah use. The issur to divert it for a use other than its primary designation is actually derived from dam. As we learned earlier, that one is meant to relate with respect to the mitzvah Kisi Adam, to cover with his hand, not with his foot. That is the source for this entire concept. That is the father of this entire concept of Bizei Mitzvah. And from there, from Kisi Adam actually is where we learn the other halachas of Sukkah, the Isser to use the Nei Sukkah, and the Isser to use the illumination of Hanukkah. For instance, by merely doing a Shimush Arai of counting money opposite the Ner Hanukkah. So in summary, we learned about a concept of Bizei Mitzvah. What is the source of this? It's Kisi Adam. We're meant to cover the dam with our hand, not with our feet. We're meant to perform a mitzvah with the utmost respect. From there we learn the following halachas. That Noyi Sukkah, the decorations of Sukkah, are not meant to be diverted for personal use. Asr l'stapik man. And our Chanukah as well is meant to remain designated exclusively to be used for the mitzvah of Chanukah, not to be diverted for other uses, even for a Shimush Arai, even for a minor casual use like counting money, opposite the Ner Chanukah. Continues the Gemara, okay, so we know that Ner Chanukah is Asr l'shtam shlo'ira, even a Shimush Arai is Asr. What about using it for a mitzvah? Say the Mefarshim that according to the Shita of Rav coming up, one may not even use the Ner Chanukah for a Tashmish Shel mitzvah. According to Rav Yehuda Marvasi as well, Chanukah is meant to be designated specifically for the mitzvah of Chanukah, not for anything else. Why is that? Explains the Ritva. Because the Ner Chanukah is reminiscent to the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash. The Chacham established the mitzvah of Chanukah to correspond to the menorah. And just as the menorah certainly wasn't diverted for any other use other than the actual mitzvah of menorah, so too the Ner Chanukah is not meant to be diverted for anything else, even to be used for another mitzvah. If so, we'll understand the upcoming Gemara. Itmar, we learned. Rav Amar, Ein Madlikim Ner L'Ner. What if one wants to use the Ner Chanukah to ignite with it another Ner Chanukah? So as we said, certainly for another mitzvah, one may not use the Ner Chanukah. But is this different? When he's transferring the flame from one Ner Chanukah to another Ner Chanukah, they're both Ner Chanukah. Perhaps this is different. Says Gemara, no. According to Rav, there's no difference. A madlikin miner l'ner. Even if we're trying to transfer the flame from one Ner Chanukah to another Ner Chanukah. Ushmol amar madlikin. In this case, it's permitted. Although ordinarily one doesn't divert the Ner Chanukah for other uses, for other purposes. But this is different because they're both Neres Chanukah. So this is the first machlokes in the set of three machlokes, of three disputes, which are subject to the opinions of Rav and Shmuel. So once again, Itmar we learned, Rav Amar, we may not ignite from one Ner Chanukah to the other. Shmuel Amar Madlikin, we may. Rav Amar, Matirin tzitzis, mi beged lebeged. We may not remove tzitzis from one beged and put it into the other beged. Shmuel Amar Matirin. One may indeed transfer tzitzis from one beged to the other. So according to Rav, this too is a bezoyin of the original Ner Chanukah, of the original beged. Even though the purpose here is, the object is to go ahead and spread the light over to another Ner Chanukah, to transfer the tzitzis to another beged. So the point is to do a mitzvah, to do an identical mitzvah. However, this is considered to be bizei mitzvah. It's a lack of respect to the first candle, to the first beged, to the tzitzis on the first beged. We may not be mevatel the mitzvah of tzitzis from the first beged. Shmuel, however, holds these cases are different. This doesn't involve, this is not considered to be bizei mitzvah, because the purpose here is to do another mitzvah Ner Chanukah with this flame, to transfer the tzitzis to another beged, where he will fulfill the mitzvah of tzitzis. So therefore it's permitted. Another item which is also subject to the machlokes of Rav and Shmuel, says the Gemara, Rav Amar, Ein halacha of Shimon begreira. There's a halacha between Rav Yehuda and Rav Shimon regarding davar she'ein miskaven. If one performs a maisa, an act on Shabbos, which is not a malacha, he has no intention of even doing a malacha, but incidentally a malacha takes place. For instance, greira. If one drags a heavy item over the earth, his intent, his purpose is to merely transport this item. But as a result of him dragging the item, a furrow develops, a charitz, which is a malacha, either a told of chayrish or a told of baina. So this is an incidental occurrence. It's not something which he had intended to do. It's not the malacha which he was trying to do. This is a davar she'em miskaven, something which he has no kavanah for. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's asur. Davar she'em miskaven is asur. One may not drag this item over the earth when he knows that perhaps a furrow will form. According to Rav Shimon, davar she'em miskaven is mutter. So how do we paskin? According to which shita do we rule? There's a machlokes Rav and Shmuel. Rabba ma'ein halachak Rav Shimon negreira. We don't rule according to the leniency of Rav Shimon regarding dragging an item on the ground. Shmuel amar halachak Rav Shimon negreira. We do indeed follow according to Rav Shimon's shita that one may drag this item because davar she'em miskaven is mutter. Why the Gemara brings this seemingly unrelated machlokes together with the other two, we will see the answer to that in the upcoming line of the Gemara. Amar Abaye, Kol Mila Demar. He's referring to his Rabbi Rabbah. So in all his things and all his customs, he would follow Avid Kirav. He would follow the opinion of Rav, Levar Mihanitlas, except for these three things. These three aforementioned items where Rabbah would follow the opinion of Shmuel. Levar Mihanitlas, except for these three things, David Shmuel, that he would follow Shmuel's opinion. What are these three things? Once again, Madlikim Ner Lener. One may transfer a flame from one Ner Chanukah to the other. Umatir and Rebeged Lebeged. One may transfer tzitzis from one beged to the other. V'alocha Rav Shimon Greira. And we pass on the halacha like Rav Shimon regarding dragging an item, the sanya, as we learned. Rav Shimon Omer, Geirer Adam Mita. One may drag a bed, kisei, a chair, b'safsel, or a bench. Ubavashlei is skaven lasses choritz. As long as he doesn't have the intention to make a charitz, to make a furrow, this is a davar she'em miskaven, and it's mutter. Explains Rashi, that's what the Gemara bundled these three items together, the ner, the tzitzis, and the greira, because Abaye referred to all three of them in one context, that his Rebbe Rabbah followed Shmuel's opinion regarding these three items. Okay, so again we have a machlokes between Rav and Shmuel regarding Ner Chanukah. Rav says, we may not transfer a flame from one Ner Chanukah to the next. According to Shmuel, when we do so. And the reason why Shmuel is matter, because the object here is ultimately to light another Ner Chanukah. So according to Shmuel, that's not a lack of respect, that's not a bizoyin to the first Ner, since the point here is to light another Ner Chanukah. Continues the Gemara. So what is the rationale, what are the svaras behind the machlokes Rav and Shmuel? Says the Gemara, Yosef Ahomer Rabbanan. So there was a Ahomer Rabbanan, a Torah scholar, was sitting, Kamed Rav Ada Barava. V'Yosef Akamer. And he went ahead, he was sitting and explaining what is the reason for the Isra of Rav. V'Yosef Akamer, time of the Rav, that he doesn't allow one to be madlik ner mener, mishum bizei mitzvah, because it's a display of a lack of respect to the initial ner, when he goes ahead and he kindles another ner from him. Amar lahu. So Rav Ada Bar Ava responded to the people that were present. Amar lo yisatzisule. Don't listen to this explanation. Don't listen to him. That is not the real reason for the Isra of Rav. Time of the Rav is not because of bizei mitzvah, but rather mishum, because they call makrish mitzvah, because he's weakening the mitzvah. Explains Rashi. When one ignites a flame from an existing flame, it appears as though he's diminishing. That mitzvah is becoming diminished. That initial flame is becoming diminished. He's dimming it. It appears as though he's being shachal nahir. He's taking away its light. He's dimming it, and he's siphoning away some of its fuel. He's weakening the mitzvah. That is the reason for Rav's Isser, not because of bizei mitzvah, because of a lack of respect, but rather because it appears as though he's diminishing from the mitzvah. He's taking away from the initial lamp. Says the Ritzvah, although we know that a ner has the power, the ability to spread out, ner la'echad, ner la'meya, we can ignite from one single lamp 100 lamps. Nevertheless, says the Ritzvah, in reality, there's a small teeny amount that gets lost from the initial flame when we kindle another flame from it. So this is a very minute amount, and he says this is the reality. So in any case, the Gemara tells us that when we ignite one from the other, we are being makhish mitzvah. It appears as though we are taking away from the first candle. Therefore, according to Rav, it's asur. So we have two approaches. What is the reason for the isur of ner l'ner? Either because of bizui mitzvah, because it's a lack of respect of the first towards the first candle, or because of chush mitzvah, because he's weakening and diminishing the first candle. My benai, what is the practical difference, halachic difference between both of these reasons? Iki benai, the difference is as follows: the komadik mishrag l'shraga. If he goes ahead and instead of using a splinter of wood or a match as a medium to transfer the flame from the first ner to the second ner, instead of doing that, he's directly igniting one ner from the other. Komadik mishraga, from one ner to the shraga. So he's taking the first shraga, the first ner, and he's transferring directly l'shraga to the second ner without any medium. Says Gemara, this will be an afkamina between both reasons. Why? Manda amar mishum bizui mitzvah. According to the approach of bizui mitzvah, mishrag l'shraga madlik. In this case, it will be perfectly fine. Why? Because the tam of bizui mitzvah only applies when he uses a kisam, Rashi says, a spindle, a splinter of wood, a match, which is a davar choil, which is an item, a non-mitzvah item. When he uses that as the medium to transfer the flame, that indeed is a bizui mitzvah. It's a display of lack of respect towards the ner chanukah, which is a mitzvah, by having it ignite a splinter of wood, which is a non-mitzvah item, which is the item shel choil. That is a bizui mitzvah. However, if he doesn't use this splinter of wood, he directly ignites one candle from the other. In this case, since it's going directly, it's being transferred from one ner mitzvah to the other mitzvah. This is not a bizui mitzvah. This wouldn't be asur for the reason of bizui mitzvah. However, says the Gemara, mitzvah, however, according to the tam of akhusha mitzvah, not because of bizui, but rather because it appears as though he's weakening and diminishing the power and the fuel of the initial flame. So it doesn't make a difference whether he's using a splinter of wood as a medium or he's directly transferring from one ner to the other. The tam of akhusha mitzvah will still apply. So this indeed is the nafkamina between both pshatim. According to the pshat of bizui mitzvah, it's only when he uses a kesam, a splinter. According to the pshat of chusha mitzvah, even if it's directly being transferred, it's still asur. So in summation, we have a machlekes between Rav and Shmuel regarding the halacha of a madlik ner l'ner. Rav says, "A madlikim ner l'ner." We may not ignite one ner chanukah from the other. Shmuel says we may, because according to Shmuel, as long as the ultimate objective is, the purpose here is to use the flame for another ner chanukah. So it's not a contradiction. It's not an interference with the initial flame, and it's mutter. According to Rav, it's asur. We have two reasons for this. Either because of bizui mitzvah, he's degrading. It's a display of a lack of respect towards the initial flame. The Gemara explained because we're using a kisam, we're using a splinter of wood, a match, to transfer the flame, and therefore igniting an item which is a non-mitzvah item from an ner mitzvah constitutes bizoyin of the mitzvah. The next approach in the Gemara was that the reason for this is a chusha mitzvah, because it appears as though he's diminishing the power of the flame, he's siphoning away some of the fuel. According to this pshat in the Gemara, even if he doesn't use a kisam, a splinter, even if he lights it directly, he transfers directly from one ner to the other, in this case as well, it is asur according to Rav. Continues the Gemara. Okay, so we have a machlekes, we have two reasons for this machlekes. Masiv Rav Avya, he has the kasha from a brisa. The brisa says selah shel ma'aser sheni. So we have a coin of ma'aser sheni. Ma'aser sheni is the fruit that's meant to be eaten in Yerushalayim, and if for some reason he can't bring it up, so we do chilul ma'aser. He transfers the kedusha onto a coin. So if he has this coin of ma'aser sheni, so he may not use it. He may not divert its use for personal use. He may not weigh opposite it in the scale. din rezav, if he wants to determine the weight of those din rezav, those gold coins, he may not use the mitzvah coin of Maaser Sheni as a weight to place opposite those coins to determine their weight. Even if the purpose of him weighing those coins is, he's using them what for? To be mechal on them, Maaser Sheni. So eventually he's using them for a mitzvah. So although the purpose here is a mitzvah, not only a general mitzvah, but this specific mitzvah of Maaser Sheni, nevertheless the Brisa tells us one may not use Maaser Sheni coins for this purpose. Now, here the goal is to use those coins for Maaser Sheni. But currently, in its present form right now, those coins are still chulin. They're not coins of mitzvah. They haven't yet been used for chilul maaser. If so, says the Gemara, let's analyze the Brisa in light of our former discussion. So it all works well if you say that kipligi Rabbi Shmuel miner l'ner, that the machlekes of Rabbi Shmuel, whether one may light one ner Chanukah from the other, the machlekes is even in the case of ner l'ner, that he doesn't use a match, doesn't use a splinter of wood to transfer the flame. He's merely igniting one ner Chanukah from the other. Still it's aser. So this is following the pshat of Ikhusha mitzvah, that the ignition of one ner from the other weakens the flame, it siphons off the fuel. And that is the reason why Rav prohibits that practice. So if that is the pshat, if we're following the second pshat in the Gemara we mentioned earlier, that the machlekes Rabbi Shmuel is based on the svara of akhushe mitzvah, weakening of the mitzvah, and the machlekes is when we are transferring the flame directly without use of a medium, without use of a splinter. Even in that case, Rav says it's asr because akhushe mitzvah, because he's weakening the initial flame. According to Shmuel, it's mutter. However, in the case of a splinter, when he's actually using a chayfetz shel choil, a non-mitzvah object, to transfer the flame, in that case, Shmuel will agree as well that it's asr, because that is a bizayon for the initial flame. To ignite a non-mitzvah item from a mitzvah, that is a bizayon. Even according to Shmuel, that will be asr. Says the Gemara once again, Iyamis b'shleima. It's all well if we propose that ki pligi Rabbi Shmuel minei l'ner, that the context of the machlekes Rabbi Shmuel is in a case where he is directly transferring. It is minei l'ner without use of a medium. And the reason for this machlekes is that Rav holds that it's asr because it's chusha mitzvah. So we imply from that, avol bekinsa asr Shmuel. But certainly in a case where he uses a kinsa, a splinter of wood to transfer the flame, in that case Shmuel will agree that it's asr, because Shmuel agrees with the concept of bizei mitzvah. He only disagrees with the concept of akhushe mitzvah. He holds if you directly transfer from one ner to the other, it's mutter. But he would agree in the case of a kinsa where he's using a spindle, a match. Certainly in that case it's asr, that constitutes a bizayin for the initial flame. If so, now we understand our brisa. Holy have it to yufta. If so, this brisa is not a refutation on Shmuel. Why? Because in this brisa as well, he's using a medium of chulin. It's like the kinsa, the coins that he's weighing opposite the Maaser Sheni coin is not yet a chayvitz shel mitzvah. It's merely an ordinary coin. It's a chulin coin. It's compared to the kinsa, to the splinter of wood. Although eventually he intends to use it for mitzvah, but currently it's not a mitzvah. So therefore Shmuel would agree that he may not use the Maaser Sheni coin to aid and benefit these chulin coins. It's compared to lighting the splinter of choil from the ner of mitzvah. And Shmuel agrees that that's a bizayin. So we understand the brisa even according to Shmuel. Ella says the Gemara, according to the other approach in the Gemara, that the machlekes of Shmuel is based on the concept of bizei mitzvah. When is bizei mitzvah applicable? When he's using the splinter. Rav says that's a bizayin. Shmuel says it's not a problem, since the point is, the goal is to light with the splinter another ner Chanukah. That is not a bizayin to the initial ner Chanukah. So the machlekes is even in that context, even when you use a kinsa, Shmuel allows it. If so, why in this brisa is it asr to weigh the mois Maaser Sheni opposite those chulin coins? His point is to use them for mitzvah. So they're just like the kinsa the splinter which is transferring the flame to another Ner Chanukah. And should be mutter according to Shmuel. Says Gemara again, Eli Amris, bekinsa namishari, that even in the case of a kinsa, a splinter of wood, Shmuel allows. Hot yavet yufta. If so, this brisa is a refutation on Shmuel. Says Gemara, Marabba, no, this brisa is different. Although Shmuel allows use of a splinter to transfer flame from an Ner Chanukah to the next, this case of the coins are different. Gzeira is a concern. Shemel yichav mishkalesev. Oveda Chacham made Gzeira. He cannot do this because it's a concern that when he weighs the coins, he's going to find out that those other coins don't contain the proper weight. They're underweight, they're overweight. He's not going to use them for chilul ma'aser sheni. So this whole effort will be in vain. It won't really end up being used for a mitzvah. And the use of the mois ma'aser sheni will not have been for the benefit of a mitzvah, and that certainly is asr. Therefore, the Chacham said one may not use the mois ma'aser sheni at all for concern of this possibility. Again, says Gemara, Marava gzeira shem lo yichav mishkalesav, that the weights won't be accurate, and he won't end up using those coins for ma'aser sheni v'komav l'chulin, and they'll remain in their chulin state. And if so, it turns out that he used the mois ma'aser for a non-mitzvah purpose. Therefore, even according to Shmuel, this is asr. Shmuel only matter when he transfers the flame to another ner mitzvah. But when it is not for the purpose of mitzvah, it's certainly asr. Continues the Gemara, Maser Rav Sheshes. We have a kasha from another price. The pasuk says, "Mechutz leparechas ha'edus yarech," referring to Aaron HaKohen lighting the menorah. So outside the pareches, which was the parechas ha'edus, before the Kaddish HaKadosh, which contained the Aron. So that's where Aaron HaKohen is meant to light the menorah. What's the point and purpose of lighting a menorah? V'chila oiro tzarech, does Hashem need the light of the menorah? V'aloi kol arba'im shana shachol b'nei Yisrael b'midbar, throughout the entire journey, the 40-year journey that Klal Yisrael travels through the midbar, who lit the way? Lo yachol ala oiroi. They were led by Hashem's light, the Amud Eish. Hashem doesn't need light. Why do we need to light the light of the menorah? Ella, says the Gemara, the pasuk is telling us mechutz leparechas ha'edus, that the point of the menorah is to provide, to display, to proclaim edus, to be a testimonial, edus ilachol bay olam, to all those in the world, shashchina sheb Yisrael, that the heavenly presence rests be Yisrael and Klal Yisrael. How is that evident from the menorah? My edus. What is this testimony? Says the Gemara, there was a very interesting phenomenon in the menorah. Amar Rav Zunei Maravi. This was a specific ner called the Nei Maravi. Some say it was the middle ner, some say it was the second from Mizrach. So in any case, there was a very unique ner in the menorah, which outlasted all the other ones. It burned so much, and it was obviously a miracle. So when he would put oil, he would pour in the same amount, the same measure, into the Nei Maravi as he did into all the other cups. Rashi explains this was the amount of oil which would last through the whole night, the longest night of the year, the night of Tevis in the winter. It's a share of Chatziluk. So that was the shear that they would pour into all the neris of the menorah. The Nei Maravi also received the same amount. Despite the fact that it had the same amount of oil, its flame outlasted all of them. It burned for 24 hours. Says the Gemara, from the flame of the Nei Maravi, he would ignite all the other neris. And when he cleaned out the neris, the Nei Maravi was the last one that was cleaned out. Rashi explains that the neris were lit in Arbaim, and they burned throughout the night. The next day, he would go ahead and be meitiv saneris. So in the morning he would go out and clean out the other cups, but the Nei Maravi was still burning, was a nes. He would leave it burning until came time, the afternoon, that he needs to light the menorah again. So what would he do? He would lift the burning wick out of its cup, clean out the cup, fill it up with oil and new wick, and then go ahead and transfer the flame from the wick in his hand over to the Nei Maravi, to the new wick of the Nei Maravi. Then he would go ahead, he would go ahead and transfer the flame from that Nei Maravi to the other wicks. So that was the story of the Ner Ma'aravi in the Beis Hamikdash, and indeed this was a edus that the Shechina, divine presence, rests in Klal Yisrael. This was an expression of Shechina. This was a great miracle. Okay, so with regard to our topic here, says the Gemara, how did he transfer the flame from the Ner Ma'aravi to the other candles? Again, the Brisa says, Mimeno Yamadlik, he would transfer the flame from the Ner Ma'aravi to the other ones. Ubahi Masayim, and the Ner Ma'aravi was actually the last one that was cleaned out. V'hacha kivin the kavi neris. By the menorah, since the cups were fixed, he couldn't lift them. Lo yisagid lo mishkavad luki. Apparently, how did they transfer the flame from the Ner Ma'aravi to the other ones? By using a splinter of wood as a medium. If so, says the Gemara, kasha, this is a kasha. Whether we are following the shita that explains that the machlekes Rav and Shmuel, whether or not we are madlik minei l'ner, is based on the premise of bezui mitzvah, since we are using a splinter and we are kindling a non-mitzvah entity from the ner mitzvah. According to Rav, this is asur because this is a bezoyin. From a ner we see that's permitted. They use a splinter to transfer the flame. Whether we are following the shita that explains that the machlekes of Rav and Shmuel is based on the premise of ikhush mitzvah. We're discussing a case where the flame is directly being transferred from one ner to the other. Nevertheless, according to Rav, that's asur because it appears as though the initial flame is being diminished. According to Shmuel, it's mutter. But according to this view, when they use a splinter, which is a non-mitzvah entity, to transfer the flame, all agree that it's asur. Even according to Shmuel, it's asur. And this indeed is a kasha from a menorah, where we know they use a splinter to transfer the flame. Says the Gemara, Tirgum Rav Papa, the Psilas Arukos. Rav Papa interpreted this halacha, this brisa, that allows transferring of the flame from one ner to the other. It was speaking about Psilas Arukos. They didn't need to use a medium. They didn't need to use a kisna, a splinter of wood. They fashioned the wicks as long wicks, Psilas Arukos. And therefore they were able to extend the other psilas, other wicks, over to the Ma'aravi and transfer flames directly from one end to the other without using a kisna. So we get around the problem of Bizei Mitzvah. There's no Bizei Mitzvah. We're not using a non-mitzvah entity. We're not using a medium of a splinter of wood. Says the Gemara. Okay, so it's not a Bizei Mitzvah. But what about a Chusha Mitzvah? You're diminishing, you're dimming the initial flame. Saif. At the end of the day, so it's not a Bizei Mitzvah, you're not using a splinter. But what about the other shita that holds that the Isser is based on the Svar of a Chusha Mitzvah? You're not allowed to weaken the initial flame by drawing from it. So even if you use Psilas Arukos and you directly transfer from one area to the other, from the Ma'arav to the other areas, there's still a Chusha Mitzvah taking place. You're dimming, or diminishing from the initial ner. Has a markash, indeed, is an unresolved difficulty. Meaning that according to the shita that holds that the Isser is Bizei Mitzvah, we understand menorah. There was no Bizei Mitzvah, there was no kisna there. It was a direct transfer, which doesn't involve Bizei Mitzvah. According to Manda Omar, that the reason for the Isser is a Chusha Mitzvah, we have no way to explain this phenomenon by the menorah. So in summary, the Gemara tells us that mois, coins of Ma'aser Sheni, may not be used as weights to weigh opposite them other coins, even though the intent purpose is to use those coins for the sake of Ma'aser Sheni as well. What is the reason for this Isser? According to Rav, because it's a bezoyin mitzvah. According to Rav, one may not divert the use of a mitzvah item because it constitutes a bezoyin when it's used for a purpose other than its primarily designated purpose. So even though the other mitzvah is an identical mitzvah of Ma'aser Sheni, it is asur. According to Shmuel, in a case where the purpose is to be used for an identical mitzvah, like one ner Chanukah to the other ner Chanukah, it's mutter. So why in the case of Ma'aser Sheni is asur, says the Gemara? Because there's a unique concern of Shema lo yischav mishkeloisav. Perhaps the weighing procedure will not pan out to be a successful one. It'll turn out that he has used the mois Ma'aser Sheni in vain. The Gemara proceeded that menorah was indeed lit in this manner, where the flame was transferred from the Ner Ma'aravi to the other ones. According to Shmuel, very simple, because Madlikim Ner L'Ner, it's permitted. According to Rav, they didn't use a kisna, they didn't use a splinter. It was a direct transfer, and therefore it's mutter. And apparently we're not concerned, we don't reckon with the svara of a chushay mitzvah. Continues the Gemara, my havila. Okay, indeed, what is the final conclusion regarding this question? Madlikin ner or a madlikin ner? Omar Avun Rav Yeshua. Chazina, let's take a look. You know what this halacha depends on? It depends on a question of how to view the mitzvahs ner Chanukah. What is the primary element? Is it the lighting of the menorah, or is it the placement of the ner Chanukah and displaying it? Chazina, let's take a look. If the primary, the ikar element of mitzvahs ner Chanukah is the hadlaka, if so, madikim ner, one may indeed light one ner from the other, just like they did by the menorah, because the ma'aseh hadlaka is a mitzvah. However, the hanocha is a mitzvah. But if the hanocha, the placement and the display of the lit candle, is the ikar element of the mitzvahs ner Chanukah, if so, the act of kindling, the ma'aseh hadlaka, is merely a preparatory act. It's not really a final conclusion of the mitzvah. And if so, we may not ignite one ner from the other, because at the point in time of the hadlaka, it's not really the fulfillment of the mitzvah. And it's as though he's kindling a non-mitzvah item from a mitzvah, and therefore it's asur. We have no proof from menorah in that regard, because in the menorah, the kindling of the second ner was indeed the ma'aseh mitzvah. Continues the Gemara. The Bailu, as we know, this question was asked: hadlaka is a mitzvah, or hanacha is a mitzvah? What is the primary element of fulfillment of the mitzvah ner Chanukah? Is it the kindling or is it the placement? Tashma, let's bring a right. Damarav. If one was holding on to the lit ner Chanukah and they never placed it down on any surface, it's not considered to be a fulfillment of the mitzvah. Says Mashmami, no. Apparently, hanacha is a mitzvah. That placement is the mitzvah. That's why in this case, which he hasn't placed it down, it's not considered to have fulfilled the mitzvah. So it's a right from here that hanacha is a mitzvah. Says no, Hasam over there. Even if you hold out hadlaka is a mitzvah, kindling is the ikar mitzvah. Nevertheless, he's not yotze when he's holding on to the lamp. Why? Because a roya aimer, the alaka will say, why is he lighting this ner? Why is he holding it? For his own purpose, for his own private use. It's not nikar. It's not evident that this ner is a ner Chanukah, and therefore it's not performing Pesach Nisa. It's not publicizing the miracle of Chanukah, and therefore he's not yotze. Tashma, let's bring another right. Amarov. If one lights his ner Chanukah inside the home, and then transports it outside where it belongs, he's not fulfilled his mitzvah. Says, well, let's analyze this halach. So if you say that kindling, lighting the ner Chanukah is the main element of the mitzvah, so we understand why this case is no good. If the hadlaka is the mitzvah, where does he need to be madlik? In its proper place, outside. In this case, where he lit it inside, he hasn't fulfilled his mitzvah. It needs to be done in its proper place. That's why but if you maintain hanocha is the mitzvah, that placement of the menorah in its proper location, that is the fulfillment of the mitzvah. So in this case, in this case that he transported the menorah outside, so although he lit it inside, the hanocha was in the proper place. So evidently, hadlaka is a mitzvah. Says Gemara, no, hasam nami, there too. Even if you hold that hanocha is a mitzvah, this case is not a proper ner mitzvah. Why? Haroya hu aimer, if one, the hadlaka will say, when he comes and he carries the ner from inside, apparently he lit it inside for his own personal use. He didn't light it for the ner Chanukah, and therefore, even if he goes and places it outside, the ner is not a ner Chanukah. It is viewed as an ordinary personal use ner, and therefore, even according to the shita of hanocha is a mitzvah, since in this case the onlooker views the hadlaka as having been done for his own personal use, he's not yotze. Because although the hadlaka is not the mitzvah, but it is a preparatory act for the hanocha, it can't be done for a purpose other than ner Chanukah. And therefore, even according to the shita of hanocha is a mitzvah, he's not yotze in this case. Tashma, let's bring a raya. Don't have Shema Levi. Ashosh is a lantern shows a delekes. By lecha is kolim kulay. So he lit this flame on Erev Shabbos, and it was burning throughout Shabbos. So it was lit as a ner Chanukah on Erev Shabbos, and now it's Motzei Shabbos, and it's still burning. What is he meant to do? L'motzei Shabbos, if he wants to use it for ner Chanukah, he needs to extinguish it, mechaba, umadlika, and rekindle it. Says, well, let's analyze this halach. So if you hold that hadlaka is the Iker mitzvah. Shaper, we understand, in this case, he extinguished it, he relit it. By doing so, he did the Hadlaka on Matzah Shabbos, and he fulfilled the mitzvahs Ner Chanukah. Eloi Amis, but if you maintain Hanocha is the mitzvah, placement is the mitzvah, how is it sufficient? Hai Madlika, Mechaba Madlika. If he merely extinguishes and relights it, that's enough. Mechaba, he needs to extinguish it. Umagbia, and lift it off its place. Umanecha, and replace it. Umadlika, and then relight it. Since it was there from Erev Shabbos, he needs to go ahead and lift it out of its place and place it specifically, expressively for the mitzvah Ner Chanukah tonight. Because Ner Chanukah requires Hanocha. He needs to do Hanocha tonight. So apparently, Rishon ben Levi doesn't hold of Hanocha is a mitzvah. Another raya, says the Gemara. Let's take a look at the nusach, the text of the bracha by Ner Chanukah. What do we say? Asher k'chanu mitzvah v'tzvano lahadik Ner Chanukah. So apparently, the hadlaka is the mitzvah. Why do we say lahadik Ner Chanukah, not laniach? Shma mina, we see from here, indeed, hadlaka is a mitzvah. Shma mina, this is a raya. Says the Gemara, based on this, v'hashad amrinan, hadlaka is a mitzvah. If so, hidlika cher shoyte v'katan. So if one who's not obligated in mitzvahs Ner Chanukah, like a cherish, a deaf person, a shoyte, deranged, v'katan, a minor, so if they light the Ner Chanukah, and then he goes ahead and places it in its proper location, so they did the hadlaka and he did the hanocha, the result is lo yosef lo klum, because the hadlaka is the ikar mitzvah. Says the Gemara, Isha vadlai madlika. Certainly an Isha can light Ner Chanukah, and as the Mepharshim say, she can even be mighty and fulfill the obligation of others by lighting for them. Why? Amar Rishon ben Levi. Although we know that Nashim are pater from mitzvah station and grandma, but this is different. Nashim chayoves Ner Chanukah, they obligated in mitzvah Ner Chanukah. Why shaf hein ayu b'yis nes? Because they also took part in the nes. Rashi has two pshatim. Since the Yehuda made a gzera to sin with the women of Kollel Yisrael, and another pshat because through a woman the nes happened. Yehuda fed the non-Jewish general food in a way that she brought him to fall asleep and eventually killed him. So they took part in the nes, in the miracle of Chanukah, and therefore they're obligated in the mitzvah just like men. And therefore, Nashim Chayavos b'ner Chanukah. So in conclusion, the maskana is hadlaka is a mitzvah. The kindling is the primary element of Ner Chanukah, and therefore we may indeed transfer a flame madlikim ner l'ner. The Gemara tells us that the hadlaka of ner needs to be in its right place. It needs to be while it's placed in its proper location, because the hadlaka is what makes the mitzvah. The Gemara tells us that if an ashashis, a lantern was burning from Erev Shabbos, he needs to put it out and rekindle it. And finally, the Gemara tells us that the hadlaka needs to be done by bar chiyuva. It cannot be done by a cheresh shoyte v'katan. So let's take a quick review of today's plot. We began with two teachings in the name of Rabbi Tanchum. Firstly, Ner Chanukah is meant to be placed within 20 amma. If it's higher than 20 amma, it's too high to be noticed, and therefore it's puzzle. And it's like this halach of sukkah and mavoi. The Gemara told us in the name of Tanchum that the pit where Yosef was thrown into, didn't contain water, but did contain nechashim akrabim. Regarding Ner Chanukah, we meant to place it betefach asmucha lepesach, within a tefach of the doorway. On which side of the doorway? On the left side, so he'd be surrounded with mitzvahs. The Gemara told us there's an isser to even count money in front of Ner Chanukah, and the Gemara proceeded and told us there's a concept of bizui mitzvah, a lack of respect towards the mitzvah, which is learned from Kisi Adam, who is meant to cover the dam with his hand, not with his foot. Subsequent from that, we learn that no sukkah, the decoration of sukkah, is not meant to be used for personal use, and Ner Chanukah is not meant to be diverted, even for a tashin sharai, for a casual use like counting money. The Gemara told us that there's machlekes regarding madlik ner l'ner. May one transfer a flame from one Ner Chanukah to the other. This is unique since the flame is being used for a Ner Chanukah, which is the same mitzvah as the first Ner. According to Rav, no, we may not. According to Shmuel, we may. We have two approaches for the reason of this machlekes. One is because of bizui mitzvah, when he uses a splinter to transfer the flame, he's using a non-mitzvah item and igniting it from a mitzvah, and that is a bizui mitzvah. There's another approach in the Gemara, even if they're directly transferring from one flame to the other without a medium, it's also because like chushim, it appears as though he's diminishing from the power of the flame and diverting its fuel. The Gemara told us according to all shittas, by Ma'aseh Sheni one may not weigh the coins of Ma'aseh Sheni opposite other coins. According to Rav, this is because it's busy mitzvah. According to Shmuel, on account of a concern that the weighing process will not conclude successfully, and it will turn out that he used the coins of mitzvah in vain. The Gemara proceeded with his shaila. What is the primary element of the mitzvah's ner Chanukah? Is it the hadlaka, the lighting, or the hanacha, the placement and displaying of the ner Chanukah? The Gemara concluded with two rayas, one from a brisa, one from the nusach of the bracha b'la hadlik ner shel Chanukah. That is the actual hadlaka that's considered to be the ikar mitzvah. And if so, we have four ramifications. Number one, madlikim minei l'ner, who may indeed transfer and ignite one ner from the other, because it's the hadlaka that is considered to be the ma'aseh mitzvah, and we learn that this is mutter, just like the hadlaka of the menorah. The Gemara told us that hadlaka bim koymai beinan. He needs to light the ner Chanukah in its proper location. Since the hadlaka is the ikar mitzvah, he needs to be madlik where it belongs. It needs to be outside. It needs to be placed down on the surface. The Gemara told us that an ashash is a lantern that was burning from Erev Shabbos. It was lit as a ner Chanukah on Erev Shabbos, and it's still burning on Motzei Shabbos. He needs to extinguish it and relight it. And finally, the Gemara tells us that since hadlaka is a mitzvah, the hadlaka needs to be done by Bar Chiyuva. But if a cher is shoyt v'katan lights the menorah, even if he goes ahead, the Bar Chiyuva goes and places it in its location, it's not sufficient, because hadlaka is a mitzvah. And the Gemara concludes that nashma also chayos in their Chanukah, since afein hayu ba'isai hanes.